A formal welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for the What's Your Creative Constellation webinar. We'll be looking at creativity through the partnership lens. I am Sara Saltee, and I'm just delighted to be with you today. I also want to extend a welcome to those of you who are listening on the replay recording who couldn't join us for the live session today, but who I know are out there listening and interested in this work, and thank you for tuning in as well. I also want to thank Ann Amberg, who's with us here today, for all of her hard work in supporting this webinar and helping to get the word out. I couldn't ask for a better colleague at the Center for Partnership Studies. And also a thank you to Rian Eisler and the Center for Partnership Studies. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more thoroughly in just a moment, and also introduce you a little bit to the Center for those of you who are new to the Center for Partnership Studies. But at this point, let me just say that it's just deeply grateful for this opportunity to connect my work with the work of Rian Eisler and the Center for Partnership Studies, and to be able to bring it to all of you, so many of you who I know through my years of association as a consultant to the center. So as I said before we began, for me, this is a sort of worlds colliding kind of moment in the best possible way. And I'm really thrilled to be here with you. So let me just begin by giving you a little glimpse of what the Creative Constellation project is all about. So first of all, it is a new framework for thinking about creativity as it relates to our identity and our life purpose. And really, that takes us into the realm of really thinking about the connections, I think, between our own sense of creative satisfaction and aliveness in our lives and the contribution that we're able to make to the larger world. Secondly, I see this as a sort of empowering way for multi-talented people, which is really just about all of us, to reframe what sometimes can feel like excess as an asset. And I get that phrase excess to asset from the wonderful Dr. Elaine Jacobson, who wrote a book called The Gifted Adult, which I recommend to you and which I think really explores from a slightly different angle many of the themes that this project has taken me into connection with. And third, it really is a toolkit for designing or orchestrating or crafting, whatever verb you like best, a life that really honors and supports the kind of creator you are, regardless of how complex a creator you might be. So our topics for today are going to be, first of all, I want to share with you a bit about where this Creative Constellation project came from, where the ideas sort of evolved and emerged from. Secondly, I'll be talking a little bit about 4 new assumptions about creativity that really kind of have to shift for us if we're going to embrace this different way of thinking about creativity and identity and purpose. And third, I'm excited to share with you what you can expect from the upcoming online workshop, Exploring Your Creative Constellation, which is coming up starting on March 17th, and I'll tell you more about it in just a moment, or at the end of the session today. But it is your opportunity to really dig in and get your hands into the Creative Constellation materials, and I hope some of you will consider joining me for that workshop coming up so soon. And I'll also be talking about some other ways you can go deeper with your own self-discovery around your creative constellation if the workshop doesn't happen to fit your schedule. So before we before we move into that, I want to, I know that there are some people on the call today who are perhaps brand new to the work of the Center for Partnership Studies, and I want to be sure that you have a sense of this wonderful organization that has partnered with me to bring you this webinar. The Center for Partnership Studies is founded by Dr. Rian Eisler, who I'm excited to say is with us today. And it is an organization dedicated to being a catalyst for cultural, economic, and personal transformation from what Rian has identified as domination cultures, which operate through fear and force, and a sort of top-down control model of organizing power, to systems of partnership, um, which are marked by relationships of mutual respect, of peace, of gender equity, and of economic sustainability. So this is profound and powerful work that is elaborated through the whole body of work that you see visualized in terms of her book covers, and also through her engagements as a powerful speaker, as an activist, and a teacher for many years. So it's very exciting for me to be situating my work on creativity in this larger framework of how it is that all of us can move from control to care, and from systems of power over to systems of empowerment. And it is really in that context that this thinking about creativity, which is really thinking about what it looks like to bring out our highest human capacities, and to have a sense of ownership and empowerment around being fully the creators that we are all born to be. Uh, so um, so that's a little background on the center. I want to start our exploration of the creative constellation work with this question, and I invite you to share in the chat box if this sounds like you. So I'm curious how many of you on the call today have a sense of a singular passion that you have organized your life around, a sense of a clear and definitive calling. Perhaps you find yourself saying things like, "I always knew I was supposed to be a fill in the blank," whatever that might be. Um, Lee is suggesting that perhaps that's not her so much, which is fine. Um, and in fact, I think that what I've found in talking with clients and others about these issues, that in some sense the model of the single burning passion model is really more rare than we might think, given that it's the model that so many of us are offered for sort of what we should be looking for in terms of organizing our lives. Um, More of us, I think, have perhaps more resonance with this wonderful quote from Diane Ackerman's work, where she says, "Who would deduce the dragonfly from the larva, the iris from the bud, the lawyer from the infant? We are all shapeshifters and magical reinventors. Life is really a plural noun, a caravan of selves." And this resonates terrifically with me because I have had that sense in my life of really being a caravan of selves, and not even a caravan in the sense of one after the other, but a multitude in the sense of all at once. If you look at my website, for example, today, you'll see that I am a creativity coach. I was trained in certified as a creativity coach back in 2003, and have since that time really had a wonderful time working with clients around finding the inner permission and the habits to sustain their own creative practice as a writer or an artist. I'm also an artist, and I've been, for the last 15 years, pretty consistently producing assemblages and shrines and other collage-based mixed media work. And I'm a facilitator of workshops for adults. And many of you know me. Some of you know me from all of these roles, or one or the other. And in the role of facilitator, it's connected me to the work of the center, where I've been the program director of leadership and learning programs for the last 7 years. In that capacity, I've also worked as an instructional designer. Before that, I was an academic for a period of time. I served as a faculty advisor guiding adult students. I became a mom, which is a role unlike any other, as many of you know. I worked for many years as an organizational development consultant with a small firm. I've made a living for a time as a freelance writer and editor. I, at one point, was very much thought of myself as an actress and had aspirations in that direction. I've also, at another time, made a living as a qualitative data analyst. And so out of all of this came, for many years, a sense that of incoherence, a sense that really, when I tried to discover what it was, who and what I was, that I really just ended up with this sense of sort of a tangled mess. And this kind of inner confusion led me for a long time to sort of play games with myself, asking, okay, what am I really? If I had to just be one thing, what would it be? But I really had a sense at the same time of that there was perhaps really something wrong with me, that beyond just being messy or flaky, perhaps what I really was commitment phobic. Maybe I was one of those people, like other people maybe couldn't commit to relationships, but I couldn't commit to work. Maybe that was something wrong with me, a problem. In any case, I felt always that I was too much and a bit incoherent, not only to myself, but to others. And when you so really what I was seeking, and I think what so many of us are seeking, is a sense of belonging, finding your tribe, a sense of wholeheartedness, being able to bring all of yourself to something that matters to you, a sense of coherence. For me, it was always very important to have a sense of self-ownership, which is really connected to that partnership model, right? That you have the sovereignty to direct your own destiny. I was seeking the experience of aliveness and joy, and always a sense of inner pressure to make a contribution that I felt was meaningful, that mattered. But what I experienced was instead the sense of not fitting in. And one of my clients who recently was talking about that same sensation, he said, everywhere I go, I never fit. I'm the odd guy out. Other people always have more passion than I do for that one thing that we're supposed to be doing. Only partially invested, sort of fragmented, just filled with lots of questions, fighting even sort of inner battles between one view or another of myself and who I was supposed to be. And out of all of this came a sense of holding back, not really fully giving myself to any one thing, because there was always a part of me that felt unincluded. And I'm seeing in the comments that some of you have had similar kinds of experience. And when you're in that kind of place, the kind of advice you get, I know you're also very familiar with. So what you hear very often from very well-meaning people and the culture at large is to follow your bliss, to find your passion, to listen for your inner voice telling you what to do. Just do what you love. And all of that sounds really great, except it can leave you if you have many different blisses, if you have a love behind every love, a passion behind every passion, and inner voices that seem to speak in different tongues, it can leave you still feeling really quite confused. So the longer you gaze, through that keyhole in your heart, hoping to see that shining North Star to sort of orient you and guide you forward. What I and so many of my friends and clients have seen instead is really a sort of whole universe of possibilities, a universe that ends up kind of feeling back to that kind of snarly mess. Uh, and of course, we're not alone in this. Um, and Walt Whitman, in his beautiful poetic way, offers us an option of saying, sort of, so to hell with this pressure to have a unified singular self. And that's a wonderful, great attitude. And of course, in the mythical sense, we all do contain multitudes. But being multitudinous doesn't really help us in those moments when we're trying to figure out whether or not to take a job or quit a job or go back to school. If nothing else, it's really hard at a party when someone asks you, "What do you do?" to answer, "I am large. I contain multitudes." Uh, it also doesn't work so well on a resume. And it seemed to me that perhaps there could be a way to acknowledge our multitudinous selves and have a coherent sense of identity and a way of conveying that identities to others. It occurred to me that perhaps complexity doesn't have to be chaos or mess or contradiction. What if our inner complexity is actually a strength? And what if instead of using a single star, a singular passion to steer by, what if we could use a cluster of stars to steer by? And then I started thinking, well, what then are these stars? It doesn't seem right that they're just interests. That felt a little too shallow. We all have different topics that interest us over time, and the number of different things an even sort of moderately curious person can become interested in is sort of infinite, right? Passions seems closer, but when I think about the areas that I might call passions, art making, teaching, writing, I notice that they're actually very different parts of me. My teacher self has a different kind of drive than my art making self or my writer self or my analyst self. A different kind of, uh, a different way of expressing creativity. Or if you prefer, different ways in which creativity expresses itself through us. And I started to think, I started to take the time to explore, um, really, well, what are the different ways that creativity expresses itself through us? And I started mapping that out. And I took about 2 years, a little bit more, to really research that question, studying creative people and really noticing the different kinds of creating they were doing. I was looking for differences not in the media, in other words, what is a painter doing different from what a sculptor is doing or a woodworker, but for underlying creative drives, different ways of orienting to different kinds of problem solving or different creative objectives. And as I went into this research, I realized that looking into the different ways that people are creative was requiring me to make 4 new assumptions about creativity. And these were really different from what I had been taught in my creativity coaching training, and I think in some ways different from the received wisdom of our culture. And so just to play off of what I'm seeing in the chat box, where some of you are speaking about that wonderful word, multi-potentialite, is a word that comes out of the research on gifted adults and children, people who have multiple potentials. And it's a wonderful word that really speaks to that sense of multiple potentials. the language that I'm using in this project is multimodal creatives, because I think it really speaks a little bit differently. There's an empowering edge, I think, to speaking about the kinds of creators that we are, as opposed to just the potentials that we possess. And but that's splitting semantic hairs, and all the words are really good for getting at what we're talking about here. But these four new assumptions about creativity are, first of all, that all humans are wired to create, that not everyone is creative in the same way, and that in fact many people are creative in multiple ways. And fourth, that it is your unique combination of creative modes, not whether or not you're creative, that form a guidance system that can lead you to the places of greatest satisfaction and contribution. So, to get at that first assumption, all humans are wired to create, this is something that really kind of crystallized for me when I read Riane Eisler's book, The Real Wealth of Nations, where she has a sort of very short, I think it's just a sentence or two, talking about the ways in which our highest human capacities are caring, consciousness, and creativity. And ever since I read that, it became clearer and clearer to me that though we tend to think of our basic needs in terms of bare bones survival, the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, etc., the truth is that our needs for learning, connecting, and creating are just as foundational to our well-being as human animals. These are drives that are innate in all of our natures, however much our history has sometimes prevented us from seeing this. Um, and the truth of this is really evident if you have children or have watched children, right? We want from the youngest ages, we want to know and understand. We want love and belonging. And we want to manipulate the stuff of the world with our hands and our minds as a way of making meaning, finding and expressing love for the world, learning who we are and what we can do, and leaving some kind of distinctive mark. And uh, this is what makes us human. And these wires are all so intertwined with each other that they really cannot be separated, right? We know, for example, that learning happens best in the presence of a caring teacher. We know that we create best when we're working on things that we love and that connect us to our inner and outer worlds. And we know that we learn by creating. You learn in a class by taking notes or making something, making it your own. So they're all intertwined and all part of all of us. And this is really different, of course, right, from the bad old thinking that creativity is a thing you've either got or don't got. That it's a trait like left-handedness or blonde hair. And the other piece about this old thinking about creativity is that it's often understood to be a synonym for artistic ability or innovative thinking, but very often connected. So when you hear people saying, I don't have a creative bone in my body, usually what they mean is that they don't see themselves as a writer, artist, or performer. And because this is the Center for Partnership Studies, bringing us all together, and one of the hallmarks of Riane's work and the work of the center is to always invite us to be connecting our personal experiences to the larger social and economic context that we find ourselves in. I'm going to indulge myself and all of us in a brief trip down a small historical wormhole to try to understand sort of where this uh, incomplete and limited view of creativity really kind of emerges from. And when you think back to the industrial age, where most work was organized in either factory kinds of settings or large bureaucracies, the phrase "Are you creative?" really served as a kind of almost like a Harry Potter sorting hat kind of question, right? The answers were yes or no. And if yes, the associations were not so good. You were presumed that you were heading for a life of poverty. You probably were considered a little bit mentally unstable, and weren't really fit for normal, quote, normal society, right? And really, what the view was that you were to be either that meant that you were going to be a writer, a performer, or an artist. Those were the main ways of thinking about the yes folks. And the no folks fit right in as a nice cog in some bureaucracy or factory. But the downside, of course, which we read about in you know uh, cultural artifacts like the man in the gray flannel suit or death of a salesman, is a sense of quiet desperation, a lack of connection to one's spirit, to the sensation of aliveness, to joy. Um, One becomes sort of part of the machine. And of course, what this, overly simplistic view was tied to was an economic system where um, the world of productivity and the world of creativity were seen as very apart and separate from one another. So, in sort of theory terms, talk about it in terms of base and superstructure. Some of you might know about that kind of way of thinking about it. That that those folks who are, occupied by productivity are in a world, a grounded world where you do what you have to do, you follow social norms, don't rock the boat, you make useful things that sell. There's an orientation to practicality, nose to the grindstone, feet on the ground, etc. While those creative others are in a separate sort of floaty space where you do what you want to do, you follow your muse, you challenge social norms, um, create beauty, explore truth, but the perspective is you're sort of in this sort of airy fairy, head in the clouds kind of place. And of course, what this view misses is the truth that up in the Cloudville there, where creative work is going on, there's a whole lot of productivity going on, right? And a lot of people who knew a tremendous amount about the discipline that it takes to do creative work and sustain creative work over time. And conversely, down in sort of productivity town, there's a lot of creativity that goes into the building and management and leadership of things, let alone the teaching uh, and farming and other things that are also happening at the same time. So, as we know, change happened, right? Sea change happened, technology changed, society changed, the economy changed, and today we really are living in a world that is demanding increasingly the full expression of all of those human capacities, the caring, consciousness, and creativity. We're in a world where robots will increasingly be doing those things that human beings um, that it doesn't require a human being, a fully functioning human being, to do. And in fact, in his book, The Rise of the Creative Class, Richard Florida asserts that creativity is the driving economic force in our current world. Um, and he says this, that prosperity in the creative age turns on human potential. It can only be fully realized when each and every worker is recognized and empowered as a source of creativity. And so the essential task before us is to unleash the creative energies, talent, and potential of everyone. If this is true, it makes sense now that it makes sense that each of us has a concern to understand the kind of creators that we are in order to find our place in this kind of economy. I would be completely remiss if I didn't point out to you that Rian Eisler's work helps us to see that it is the work of care and caregiving that is still largely done by women that is absolutely essential and required to develop and nurture the capacities that Richard Florida is talking about as the economic drivers of the new age. So here we see that again, that intertwining of the care and the creating, which are inseparable sort of at this larger level. But for now, we can just note that we're in a world now where creativity and culture are so tangled up with the economy, they really can no longer be teased apart. They're really swirled together in a sort of dynamic system, perhaps even a bit more dynamic than a swirl cone, but you get the idea. Um, and what this leads to is coming out of our historical wormhole here, a kind of pernicious development, which is that as creativity has gotten more and more tangled up with productivity, we've seen, and I'm sure you've all seen this, an explosion of books and experts trying to help us get more creative. The problem is this presumes that everyone's got a problem with low creativity levels, that we're kind of machines that just need some more amperage behind that creativity wiring. And low creativity levels is a really fun problem to solve. You can offer up endless opportunities to kind of jack up the creative juices and have 100 new ideas before breakfast, right? But the problem is that this is really actually not the real issue that's holding people back from contributing their creative gifts. It has nothing to do with the real issues of what it takes to live as a fully expressed, complex, creative human self. And more than that, it begins always from the premise that you're not good enough, that you have you need this sort of external stimulation to get yourself to be more creative, as opposed to aligning your life around the ways in which you're already wired to create. So that brings us to the second big assumption, which is that not everyone is creative in the same way. So when you look around this slide at all of these different creative people, although there's certainly overlap in some of the ways that they're creative, no two are the same kinds of creators. There are visual artists, designers, a chef, author, entrepreneur, inventor, explorer, etc. Social movement maker, business builder, etc. You might not know that George Takei, in addition to being an actor known for his work on Star Trek, is also a politician. He's now running a social media sort of empire, and he's a powerful activist for gay rights and also for immigrants' rights, and wrote a play that's coming out that's out now around his the experiences of his family as in the Japanese internment camps in World War II. So not everyone is creative in the same way, and many people are creative in multiple ways. Some of you are probably very familiar with the work of Alice Waters, who I'll use as an example of this. She's a James Beard award-winning American chef, the owner of Chez Panisse in Berkeley, California, and is really known as a leader in this and founder, really, of the slow food movement. And her journey through her constellation is that she really started as a maker, as a chef. She wanted to make really good food. And she found that in order to make really good food, she had to learn to grow that food and to do it organically and locally. And it turned out that this idea that we ought to be eating foods, that it made a difference to eat foods that were organic and fresh, turned out to be a pretty disruptive concept in a world kind of organized around big corporate food, right? Uh, and so she tapped into her social innovator mode and developed what became the Edible Schoolyard project, where students at where gardens would be associated with elementary schools, and students would be involved in growing food that they could eat in their own cafeterias. So to do that project, she drew on her history as a teacher, and really over time has become a leader speaking around the world about the importance of organic, sustainable foods and what that has to do with a sustainable environment and sustainable communities. Um, and so many of us can point to ways in which the different aspects of our creative selves have functioned not necessarily in terms of balance, but in terms of harmony, that we find ways over time to harmonize these different parts of ourselves so that they play like a beautiful chord as opposed to sort of feeling discordant. So if we move beyond the question, are you creative? And really uh, step away from that kind of dead end question of how creative are you? Uh, I think that it makes sense instead to focus on this new question. How are you creative? And we should have a select all that apply option, so that it isn't about finding the one way, but about finding the specific combination of ways in which we are creative. So my research into the different ways people are creative led me to wrestle it down to 25 different creative modes, which I believe are present in different combinations for each of us. And after those years in sort of thinker analyst mode, researching what this set of creative modes might look like, I shifted into my own sort of expressionist maker mode, and I spent another year in my studio illustrating each of those 25 modes, and creating what is now the Creative Constellation card deck that allows people to play around with their own constellations in a really tactile way, and which is also really full of a bunch of different coaching questions, and other kinds of tools that help you to see the patterns in your own creativity. So this is related then to the fourth assumption, again, which is that it is your unique combination of modes that form your inner guidance system and can lead you to those places where your creative satisfaction meets your contribution to the world. There are a few kind of clarifying points I think are important to make here about this framework. First of all, your constellation is not a type. It is a flexible guidance system that allows for evolution and growth. So when you're working with your creative constellation, you're not looking for a sort of um, type that defines you now and forever. You're looking for that combination of modes that you can draw on in different combinations and putting different emphasis at different times in your life. Just as sort of our aspect to the stars changes as we journey across the earth, so our aspect to our own creative stars changes, across our lifetime. And I wanted a tool that could account for that. The second observation is that if you're not expressing those modes which are your major creative modes, the brightest shining stars in your constellation, you will feel the lack. One client talked about it as a kind of ache. I experience it as a kind of starting with a kind of gritchiness or irritability, a sense of disconnection from myself, and ultimately depression. Creating is how we make meaning, and when the meaning drains out of our lives, we become depressed. And so part of the thinking behind this is that uh, moving our way forward in a positive way really depends on our ability to create in the way that we are wired to create. Thirdly, that reframing your excesses as your assets is really key to accepting and expressing your core being, which is in turn key to living in partnership with yourself. And that your constellation can help you identify areas of strength and challenge within the larger cycle of the creating process so that you can ultimately better fulfill the promise of all those multiple potentials within you. So let me tell you a little bit about what you can expect from the Exploring Your Creative Constellation workshop that's coming up. And then we'll hopefully have just a bit of time to talk together before we end. So the Exploring Your Creative Constellation workshop is coming up, as I said. It's on March 17th it starts, and it is a 3-session class or workshop that meets on these 3 Fridays from 10 to 12 Pacific time. It will be Pacific Daylight Time by the time we get there. And in those 3 sessions, we'll be doing basically this. In the first session, we'll walk through those 25 different modes, and you'll be doing a sort of self-assessment to identify the stars in your creative constellation. We'll talk about it in terms of major modes, minor modes, glimmer modes, which are sort of faint but possibly there, and then nope modes that you can identify as just not being part of your wiring at all. In the second session, will have a wonderful time mapping your constellation onto what I call the spiral galaxy of creating. And let me just say a little bit more about that piece of the Creative Constellation Framework. In this view of the Creative Constellation Project, the second layer beyond those 25 modes is really this, that the creating process is a kind of spiral galaxy, that it is a cyclical and evolving process that really takes us through a series of overlapping phases, from generation through manifestation, through release and connection of what we've created, bringing it out into the world, and then a phase called the void, which we'll talk about quite a bit in the workshop. At the center of this spiral or cycle of creating are 7 core practices, which we'll also talk about, which are both sort of the axle around which this cycle turns, and also the drivers that keep us moving forward in the face of fear, which is also always present in the creative process. So those core practices of love, trust, presence, practice, audacity, inquiry, and play are all part of this sort of the energy force driving this creative spiral forward. We'll also talk about what happens when the spiral gets flipped in the uncreating direction, and that's kind of a fun conversation as well. It turns out that those 25 creative modes fall into 5 clusters of 5 modes. And so we'll also talk about in the second session how those creative modes cluster into 5 essentialist modes that really express in a very direct way those core practices, 5 generator modes, which are really all about the development of the new, 5 manifestation modes, which are really about making things happen, making them come to life, the how of what it's going to take to pull something off. 4 connector modes that really relate to bringing creativity or creative projects or products into relationship with other people who can use them. And then a final cluster of 5 guiding modes. And these are creative modes that are really oriented to helping others navigate their way through this whole creating spiral, including the void. So much more about that, but I wanted to just give you a sense of what that means to be mapping it onto the spiral galaxy. And in our third session, we'll be practicing using your constellation as a guidance system. So we'll be applying it to a personal decision or dilemma that's in front of you today. And I'll be doing sort of mini coaching sessions with people in the workshop who want to do that, kind of helping to talk through the inquiry process of just discovering how your own constellation is working as a navigation system for you. So if that workshop is not let me just say, first of all, there are a couple other elements in the workshop. There's an online discussion space where you'll be able to talk with others in the workshop between our class sessions and sort of do your reflection and conversation. There's lots of great worksheets and activities that you'll do between our class sessions to guide your own inquiry and discovery. And there's also a special discount on the card deck for people who register for the workshops. Owning the card deck is optional. It's not something you have to do to take the workshop, but I think people will find it useful and fun to have those cards to play with while we do this work. And so when you register, you'll get a code to use to get a discount on that card deck. The workshop is as I said, coming up on March 17th. But if you register before March 10th, which is the end of this week, this Friday, there's an early bird discount available on the tuition. As I said, you'll get a card deck discount code, and we'll be sending you that registration link in your follow-up email so you can claim your spot in the workshop. If the workshop doesn't work for you, but you're interested in the card deck, we'll send you also in the follow-up email after the webinar today a link where you can purchase the deck. It is designed really to be a kind of workshop in a box, so that it's 56 cards, the 25 different creating modes, and then also as I said earlier, lots of different coaching questions to guide your own personal inquiry process around 4 different activities. And so that's available online and can be shipped to wherever you are. Other stuff to do. If you prefer to, you can either instead of or to supplement the workshop, you can contact me about one-on-one coaching, and there is a web page on my site that speaks to that. I'd love to have you join my Salty Goodness newsletter. You can find a link to subscribe to that on my website. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. And I'd love to hear from you at any time around any ideas that you have about this work, about possibilities for connecting it to other things going on in terms of conferences or writings or anything of that nature. I also want to urge you to get involved with the Center for Partnership Studies. You can learn lots more about the center on their website, and particularly check out the upcoming classes. Changing Our Story, Changing Our Lives is coming up in April with Rian Eisler, and I'm I'll be co-facilitating that with Rian. And then the Caring Economy Advocates Program is coming up in May. And we'll also send you a link. Some of you were so grateful to those of you who made a donation to the center when you signed up for this webinar today. If you opted out of that, but now would kind of like to make that donation, we'll send you a link to make that possible in an easy way. So I'm going to close my piece here with just a few minutes left for conversation with this thought for you. And that is that I know for sure that our beautiful, imperiled world needs all of who we are. And that when we cease our internal battles, we're freed up to create the impact that deep down inside we know we're capable of. And so if you are somebody who is still beating yourself up, saying that self-deprecating thing you hear people say all the time, oh, someday I'll figure out what I want to be when I grow up, as if you've somehow failed to achieve adulthood, if you failed to find that singular burning passion, I urge you instead to ask yourself simply this: what do I want to create next? And then go to it, using your whole creative constellation as your guide. So thank you so much for joining me for this discussion today. And I wonder in our remaining few minutes if anyone has comments or questions that you want to share or ask. You have a little hand icon on your control panel. And if you do have a question that you want to raise, just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Or you can pose a question or comment in the chat box, and I'll answer. Thank you for that, Kia. Samantha's asking, where can I find the deck? So Samantha, in the follow-up email, I will include the link, the web link to where you can order that deck online. It is on my website, which is sarasaltee.com. And there's a page where you can just order that, and we'll, we, meaning me, I will ship it out to you. I'm hearing from Anne that Nikki was asking about getting a card deck sent to Australia. At the moment, I have a shipping code built in for Canada, and I can add one to Australia. So knowing that, I will go ahead and add that to my website, and so shortly you should be able to order it and have the proper shipping factored in. Thank you, Donna. Nikki, I'm very glad to hear this is speaking to you. I had a feeling I wasn't alone. Good. Thanks, Wendy. Yeah. I think, and Rian, let me unmute you. I see your hand up. So, and now if you unmute yourself, Rian, then we'll be able to hear your voice. I think I had you muted and then you had also muted yourself. There you go. Oh, Rian, you're not muted, but we're not hearing your voice. I wonder if your microphone's not connected. Oh, Lee, I'm so glad that it felt on point to you. I had a feeling that it might speak to your experience as well. Yeah. Kim, let me go ahead. I see your hand. Let me unmute you and go ahead, Kim.
Hi, everybody. Is this audible?
Yes, you sound loud and clear.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm just deeply grateful and moved to tears.
Oh.
Such a fantastic presentation. And, Hey, lady, I don't expect you to remember me, but I was part of the first cohort at Seattle U in
Oh my
2009.
goodness. That is
Yes, I
fantastic.
just to say thank you for your tour de force and all your incredibly, deeply humane, the questions that you have shared with us that came right up out of your own heart and soul, and the courage that it took to create all your research. I love it. And here's my main. I think the reason that I'm tearing up is that we need bold leadership yesterday. And
Yeah.
I think it is, yeah, it is no mistake. And I hope I don't sound too regionalistic here, but I was seriously moved when our great state of, the Evergreen State stepped out to protect the Constitution
Mhm.
the last couple of weeks here, against what I think is a dangerous and unprecedented and unexpected presidency.
Yeah.
And what I'm moved by is something along this lines is that Rianne's deep experience in Nazi Germany
Mhm.
has been one of the most powerful reminders of how precious democracy is everywhere.
Mhm.
And I cannot tell you how often her deep, heartful sharing about that has guided me through, frankly, the last 2 decades at the very
Mhm.
least, particularly through the two Bush administrations. And it's such a big thing I'm trying to say, but it's the creativity that I think is so being called forth because we're in an unprecedented sea of opposites.
Mhm.
And the binary thing, though don't get me wrong, I'm all for speaking truth to truth to power and, a good fight when the good fight is on. But we so need that third body, the
Mhm.
cosmic creativity that holds all the opposites.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm so moved by, that we need both. There's times to say no, and there's times to uplift the entire sea of consciousness, the consciousness, the creativity, the caring. And I think we're in an unprecedented moment where we have to lift the whole boat.
Mhm.
It's just so deep,
Yeah.
so important, and just thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. And the personal thing I'll just put out in a sentence, and it has to do with the shadow of our country, of America.
Mhm.
And that is that Rand's work, and now today your work, has given me the personal inspiration over these last 9 years to take an absolutely mythic descent into the darkness of the top 5 banks who created our downturn. And I'm fighting that fight, and I intend to set legal precedent. But far more important is well, equally important, I should say, is unleashing the caring to the
Mhm.
people who've been displaced, to the communities who need help, to the water that's been poisoned, to the
Yes.
land records that need restoring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's serious.
Yeah.
And there's so many places where this conversation is frankly, or either one, over people's heads because there's so much denial, or it's just not welcome
Yeah.
because people are so invested in the status quo.
Mhm. Well,
Oh, thank you.
so thank you for those beautiful comments, and I know that there are many people on this call who similarly have had their been more than inspired, but really guided by Rian's work and her example. And I'm moved that you are seeing this work, in that same context, or as as a piece of that bigger work. And I will say too that I was very conscious in thinking about the different what those 25 modes are, to include modes like disruptor mode, which is a mode which uh, is uh, about creating uh, I'm just a little distracted by the echo, so I'm going to mute you real fast here, Kim. Sorry. Um, so disruptor mode, which is about uh, uh, creating the conditions for regeneration by putting an end to that which no longer serves. And I hear you speaking really powerfully to creating in that way. But I also hear about some other modes, which, for example, cultivator mode, which has been so left out of our thinking about creativity, but it's the mode in which we we create the conditions for thriving ecosystems, whether they're human or natural, right? Uh, and um, and 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 also modes like the social innovator mode, which is preoccupied with creating human relationships of equity and justice. And so I was very conscious in thinking about what constitutes a creative mode to be inclusive of those modes which we most need now, so that we can all identify with them as parts of included in our vision of ourselves as creators, because so many people I think feel that their activism is somehow separate from their creativity, which happens only in the art studio or and I really want to be advocating for a view which sees creativity in that much bigger picture that you're catching on to, of course, right away, of really what it means to move our whole culture forward. And really, creativity ultimately is connected with problem solving, and we have really large problems that are, could not be more truly life and death in terms of the future of our planet to be solved. So underlying this is that awareness too, which I think you're also picking up on. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again to all of you for joining me today. I'm so sorry that we weren't able to hear Rion's voice, but I know she's present in the chat box, and I really appreciate your presence with us here today, Rion. And Deanna, thank you for mentioning Otto Scharmer's U theory. And you'll see in my work that the whole notion of the void and the role of the disruptor at the edge of the void is really very much aligned with that, and also with the work of the first name Bridges, who talks about the nature of transition within both personal change processes and cultural change processes. I think as creators, we really all need to come to understand that experience of the void not as a problem but as a feature of the creating process that all creators have to understand and live with and manage. So again, just a final thank you, and watch for a follow-up email with all the information you might need to join the workshop, to order a card deck, or to participate in the upcoming classes through the Center for Partnership Studies. And again, just my heartfelt gratitude to have so many of you here from so many different parts of my own constellation. It's really, really lovely. And to those of you who are brand new to me and to the center, welcome. I hope it's just the first of many, many connections yet to come. So be well.